Hey everyone, Dave Putz from JKP Holdings. Nathan and I on this week's show broke down some note assets that we find very attractive or interesting. We show you some issues, some problems with some assets on tape. We also show you some deals we liked. We show you deals that we differ on some kind of opinion on, what he may like, what I may like, may differ, some things we agree on. So this video was really good to do to show people what we thought you guys would learn from. And maybe we can learn from it too. Hope you like it. Dave from JKP Holdings. Nathan Turner, how are you, man?
Very, very good.
You're a whole lot better now.
Yeah.
We'll go from there. So we wanted to kind of break down some deals. We didn't get as many as I hoped for investors, called zero. So we're going to break down our own deals and have this recorded. It'll go on YouTube and everything else. And we wanted to show you guys how we see deals, how we look at things, which probably a little differently how you do it. So I'm going to see if I can get the crowd in here. We have about 25 people live at that point, and see if we can get them back in here and whatnot. Hopefully the sound should be perfect. You're direct LinkedIn and go from there. So Nathan, when you get a tape, how do you narrow that down? Do you go by states? How do you narrow down your list?
So the very, very first thing I do is I look at states. So there are, when in fact, when I go out and buy notes, if I'm going and approaching a new seller, they'll say, what are you looking for? And I usually just say I buy nationwide, which is mostly true. But there are some states that I don't like. I don't like New York and New Jersey. I'm not a big fan of Maine, Rhode Island, Connecticut, Massachusetts. Kind of that whole New England area is really not
good. Northeast is not a fun area.
It's not a lot of fun. And the reason is because I'm always looking at worst case scenario, which is a foreclosure. And if it needs to go to a foreclosure, those are some very difficult states to get foreclosures done. And so, and you know what I learned by experience as well, Hawaii sounds all glamorous and cool. Man, you get caught in a foreclosure and it just drags on forever.
Yeah.
Ask me how I know.
So we go by state, right? We filter out the states we don't like. And then what we do from there is we kind of say, why do we not like the states? Is it the state illegal? Is it state because of debt licenses? Is it state because of cost, expenses, those kind of things? Where is it that it's an issue?
And foreclosure is very, very first thing, foreclosure laws and time. But you're right, things like licensing. So for example, Georgia, I actually don't buy in Georgia. I love the laws that they have there as in terms of foreclosure, but I don't have a license there and I don't anticipate getting one. And so it's just because it's difficult and it's an extra layer.
So those who don't know, Georgia has a law of 5 assets, and usually it's in your individual name. And if you're a company, and if they catch you, right, it becomes a situation where you can it's a felony. So it's a big deal. Something I veer away from myself.
Yeah, me too. So I steer clear.
Yeah. So let's dive into what we look at. Very similar numbers, right? One of the first things we look at is states for us. Kentucky, $4,000 plus a year debt license. I'm not bothering.
No.
Northeast, I will look into New Jersey. I'm now avoiding PA, New York up pretty much. Some parts of New York I'll entertain. Northwest areas, not the boroughs.
And you know what? After our interview a couple of months back, I am actually now looking at New York, but with a couple of caveats. Like for number one, there can't be a foreclosure already started.
Yes,
if there's a foreclosure already started, I'm out. But it's on my radar now at least. And you know what? Only because we did this interview with great
attorneys,
taught us some things. Yeah.
So if you haven't seen it, definitely YouTube it and check it out.
Yeah. So New York is back, at least on the radar.
Yes.
At least on the radar.
Yeah, so there's some quick foreclosure, as long as you're not in that state, you can do things, expedite the process. So for us, the next pillar for me is, I don't want any asset with a property value below 50,000 or above 300. Reasons is, if I'm gonna do any kind of kitchen work or foreclosure work, and it's gonna cost me $5 or $6, $7,000, the value of the property means nothing in terms of foreclosure. It's a flat across the board. And as you could probably do the quick math, $5,000 on a $50,000 asset, 10%.
Yeah.
So I'm losing it like that.
Yeah.
So the lower price assets is something we aren't attracted to. The reason we don't do above 300,000 is the person typically is more experienced, they have more money, they have more abilities to check out things. So we kind of avoid that issue of dealing with some sophisticated borrowers,
Yeah.
right? So and you can check out the New York laws, which isn't strictly for New York, but on our YouTube channel, which this will also be on. So there are some pillars that are coming about, but you also have the debt license side of it, which you have to make sure you're aware of.
Right.
You can watch our huge debt license video as well on YouTube, which is really intriguing, and it's not a clear-cut answer.
Right.
But we would like to narrow down the list of what states we are comfortable with. I'm about 14 or so, a little bit more than that, but we primarily look for those kind of things. The next pillar we look at, for me, is it a first or second or CFD, right? If it's a second lien, unless it's performing, I'm gonna pull it out. And just because the tape says performing doesn't mean it's performing, right? Except
Just
for
because the tape
caveat
says-
that Nathan caught, right?
Well, yeah, and just because the tape says a particular value, for example, right?
Yes.
You don't take that at face value either. Trust but verify, and not that the seller is trying to pull one over. I've been on the other side of that table, and you know what? The seller just doesn't know. They got this spreadsheet from a bank, and so they don't know. They know whatever the bank told them.
Yes.
At best, maybe the seller went through. Well, depending on the seller, I've had sellers where they're trying to give me a Zillow value, and then I have other sellers that actually have done BPOs, and they'll
True.
provide a BPO value, and some don't give a value at all, and so it's anything in between. So you're one of those things you have to check out.
And the caveat on the fact of knowing if it's performing or not, usually is run through the next due date, right? Pay through date, not last payment received, except for the fact you have to make sure, Nathan caught this one really well one time, that the date of the tape is equivalent to today or most recent.
Right.
So the date of the tape or date the information is most accurate is 3 months old, caveat, right?
Yeah.
And the next due date is, 3 months old as well. It's not actually not performing, it's actually performing, and the tape's just old.
Yeah, I had that once, and I got really good deals on a few loans because it was just old data. It wasn't that they were not paying, it was just old data. And so I ended up getting a great deal on those, which was happy day.
Yeah. So let's, unfortunately we weren't getting a lot of tapes. We didn't get any assets from people. And those who are curious about sending us assets, know the fact that we're not going to share any other details besides the UPB, the interest rate, the numbers, and the property itself. We could pull privately and get a value, right? I would use my due diligence portal to pull that information out, finding out the last listed price, all information. If it's foreclosure, I would get that information from that. I don't want to know who the seller is. We'll grab your name just so we know who it is. However, we won't ever reveal your name, because if you're in the middle of that deal, we don't want anyone knowing about that. Right. So in terms of the address, we'd only leave it for valuation. We would not give it out.
Right.
As long as you're comfortable with that, we would be willing to break down the deal. I would think that, we would even close out the fact that what city it's in, so no one knows what kind of deal it is, where it came from. Because it's not about the deal, where it came from details. It's about breaking in the numbers, right?
Yeah.
So,
We'd love to see what deals you're coming across and help you evaluate them.
yeah, and we're not trying to steal anything.
No, and you know, you talk to any node investor and they will tell you everything you want to know except that one thing. That's
Yeah.
the only secret in node investing is
Yeah.
where you get them.
Yep.
So that's taken very seriously.
Yeah. Yeah. And because if you have a great source, we're going to beg for it, but you better not give it up, right? That's the whole point of it.
Yeah.
That's the only caveat that we don't share. And me and Nathan's done this off air, which is really cool, right? Like, and we see things differently. So we wanted to show a screen. Let me make sure I can bring it up correctly. And this will kind of show you a idea of what we're looking for. So I'll have the chat open for those who are curious, and then we'll go from there. Make sure the chat's open. Okay. So I'll have the chat open. If we have to unmute you, I will, but we'll go from here. So we have a few deals here that we're looking at.
We've blanked out there like the loan number and address.
Yep.
Again, just for privacy concerns. I want to make sure that we're not stepping on any toes anywhere.
Right. So what we want to look at the fact that make sure one thing. Give me 1 second, guys. So Nathan, when you're looking at this stuff too, what is something that stands out to you that you think I got to either like it, not like it, and I really want it? You know, what are some of the things that stand to you and say, whoa, this asset's really good?
Man, oh man, there's all kinds of things. So things like when I'm looking at a tape, I'll look at the interest rate, for example. If it's one that's recently non-performing, and by recent, I mean sometime in the last 12 months. If it's got a higher interest rate, I'm much more interested in that.
Yes.
Because the chances of that person making payments again is much, much higher. So I'm much more interested in that. If it's, let's see, if it's got, if there's a large difference between equity, like if there's a big equity gap, whether positive or negative. So if the UPB is much lower than the value or vice versa, I like those. That I can find a lot of good value in those things where it's a lower UPB and higher value, or vice versa, where it's a high UPB and a lower value. I like that kind of a deal. It gives me more options when I'm working it later.
You know, yeah, the interest rate to me is a huge thing, and I apologize for being distracted. I realized we had some borrower numbers in there.
Oh, okay.
I was distracted to black those out so we don't have those in there. So for me, if I'm looking at, and we do this in our mastermind weekly class, we have a way to interest rate. Most people don't look at interest rate for some reason. Understand the fact that with a 2% interest rate, you know your P&I is below. If you're looking to get, say, a 10% yield, you can't really get a 2% to a 10 without a dramatic decline of price. Your bid has to be dramatically lower, because that 2% is really your gross yield, subtracting servicing fees. You're probably 1.5. Now to bid that, you have to bid dramatically lower. Now if it's a 10, it's a lot easier.
So the only time that is not a factor is if it's been non-paying at the, let's say the last date paid and the last time that they made a payment, the last payment made is like 2 or 3 years ago. If it's been 2 or 3 years since they've made a payment and their interest rate is at 2.5%, I'll look at that.
Yeah.
Because there's almost no chance that they're going to start making payments again or reinstate that. So that 2.5 becomes less important, not necessarily
because
completely
the reason we care about interest rate is A, for performing loans, and B, loans that could reperform or reinstate.
Right.
Remember the fact that you can't modify a loan if they reinstate.
Right.
If they're 5-6 months behind, they reinstate. There's nothing you can do about that interest rate. Your P&I is going to be what it is. Your monthly payment. So again, feel free to put comments in the chat. I apologize for the crazy Facebook, LinkedIn stuff. So let's dive into some of these numbers here and show you what we're looking at. So there we go. If you can't see some, let me know. If you can't hear anything, turn your speakers on, because I guarantee you that everything's working. So let's rock and roll with this. So we have a few assets in here. The first thing that stands out to me, let's go deal by deal first, right? Here's some numbers here. So we're in Iowa. We're flying over Iowa. Some people look at the stuff and say, I'm going to do Google Walk, and they Google Walk and stuff like that.
Mhm.
right? For me, I punch every one of these assets in my due diligence portal to pull out things such as, I'll scroll over here. Bedrooms, bathroom counts. I will get last listed price, last listed date, and things like that. If we can get that information, I will. If I can't, I don't, right? I like to know if it's foreclosure data. I like to know what it is, so.
Yeah, that's good stuff. Well, so one of the other things I look at, state is one of those things, and then I look at the city. So in this case, we got Fort Dodge, Iowa. I don't know much about Fort Dodge. I've never heard of it. So I'll Google it and see how big is Fort Dodge. And for me, anything with a population under 20,000 people is a no-go. Unless it's like a suburb of a big city or something like that, and it's just outside of a big
And
city.
one of the things I'm trying to get in our portal is days of market, right? Because that will
That's a good one.
outdo a low volume of people. So if you only have 20,000 people or 15,000, but days of market's 45 days, it's just going crazy. Something's happening there.
Yeah.
Where if the days of market's 300 days, that tells me something differently, right?
So let me ask you, years ago, I used to spend a lot more time looking at the specific city. So if it was let's say it was 25,000 people, so it's just like kind of barely
Yep.
over my threshold, then I would go in and I'd start looking at the economy in that city, what's the major business, all those kinds of things. I do that every once in a while if it's one that I'm really unsure about. Do you spend any time looking at that kind of thing?
I'm the same way you are. It's a deeper due diligence number,
Yeah.
right? Initially, when I look at tapes, that's not a pillar, because if
Not
the deal
usually.
numbers don't work, who cares?
Right. Right. But if it's like just barely over
Yeah,
25, 30,000 people, I'll start looking at that kind of thing. And then
yeah,
one thing I'll look at actually is on the Wikipedia page for that city, it'll give me a lot of the time, it'll give me population by year. And if I see, 50 years ago, it was booming and it's just been slowly dying this whole time, then nope, pass. But if it's the other way around, where it's gone from 5,000 people and then in the last 10 years, all of a sudden it's growing, excellent.
yeah. So with that said, I don't look at population at all in any of my numbers,
Oh, interesting.
right? I look at values, I look at less sold, and I depend on my agents. When I don't run BPOs, but when I run my valuations with reaching out to REO agents, that's when they tell me what's going on. And I look at stuff, because it's population is like crime. A lot of people look at crime as a number.
Yeah.
I don't care about crime, right?
I don't either.
If it's in a really high crime area, but people are buying houses, do I care about the crime?
Right.
No, right? But I get it. Some people want to have that there. But so in Iowa situation here, we have probably just here, we have a UPB of 112.
Yeah.
Right. We have all these numbers here. Was this the regular mortgage or this?
This one, that the giveaway on this one is P&I 0. This means this one is a reverse mortgage. So the borrowers are deceased and this is a reverse mortgage. So the payment is 0. The only play on this one is foreclosure. Really. I mean, you may be able to squeak out something else, but really you're looking at a foreclosure on this.
Yeah. So the borrowers are gone. We have our heirs, right? We derivative our heirs, just like any foreclosure. But that's where it's at. And it's a reverse mortgage is a little bit different, but it's the same idea. They're actually getting money versus taking money in.
Yeah.
And that UPB grows as the reverse mortgage goes. So they're borrowing on it. Yes, Cindy, there's a lot of low interest notes right now. They're showing for portfolio for the fact that if it's low interest, their gain isn't great unless they bought it for a really good price.
Yeah.
If you take a property back, population is important to look at. Absolutely. For me, if the population is 15,000, but there's houses bought and sold every day and the days of market, say 30 days, I'm less caring about that population because there's movement, right?
Yeah, that makes sense.
And get a feel for it.
Yeah.
Where you may have a population, a really big population, but no one's doing anything. Do you want to sell in a market that's dead or one that's alive? So that's where I get from Nathan on that. Again, different perspectives, right? We see the fact that it's a pre-judgment idea. We see a next due date. Remember, this is not the last payment received, next due date in the amortization schedule.
Right. And then the fact that it's prejudgment means that they've started foreclosure already. It hasn't gone very far, but it's something has started. So
Yep.
that's nice. I can just kind of step into wherever the foreclosure left off.
All right, so
Saves me
let's
a
look at the
little time.
fact that we have a year built. Does a year built bother you at all?
Not generally. Before 1950, I start to think about it. If it's like 1920, kind of, sort of. I don't look at it too closely. Again, same thing. If houses are selling in the neighborhood, I don't care. If it was
Yeah.
built in 1910, sure. If everything's selling in the neighborhood. So I don't look too closely at that. How about you?
I care about it when it gets too old. I'm more that, sub 1930s that starts bother me.
Yeah,
Because it becomes a problem. It becomes a problem house unless it's been you renovated or something different. That's when the only time it comes about. That doesn't bother me.
okay.
So let's continue here. So we have a single family home, 2 bedroom, 1 bath. Some people say I don't want any houses with 2 bedroom, 1 bath. It limits the people.
Right.
Again, it depends on the housing in the area. If everything's a 2-1 in a small area, it makes sense.
Yeah.
And I'm gonna let my agent tell me, hey, you have a
Right.
real hard population for this.
Yeah. And again, Fort Dodge is, I think, population 23,000 people.
Yep.
You're not finding as many larger houses there. So a small house doesn't really bother me too much.
So we have a situation where this thing is underwater, right? We have $115,000 balance. We have $85,000 value of the property. So we're looking at the fact that we're gonna be able to sell this thing for as much as we were gonna know it for,
Right.
right? So we're gonna have our bid based on this value.
Yeah.
Granted, that's your byproduct we always talk about. Don't bid based on that number.
Yeah.
But understand that's the number you're gonna be focused on. When you make this offer, you're gonna be based on your returns, but the returns are gonna be driven, numbers are gonna be driven by returns based on numbers, and then it will be based on that collateral value. Because you can't bid 100% of UPB on this thing. It's
Right.
not possible. I don't care how high the interest rate is. Bidding 100% of this UPB, you're not gonna get that much money when you go to auction.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
This is definitely an auction play
Yeah.
versus take this property back. Because more than likely, unless you really want to, and no one will bid it, if the property's worth 85 grand and you make an offer at the auction for 80, it's more likely that people will bid on it.
Yeah, no, exactly. I would much rather have it sell at foreclosure auction than take back a property. My ultimate goal is not to own property. I don't ever want to own property.
Yep.
So if I can get this unloaded at the auction, that's ideal.
So in Iowa, I'm gonna bring up my master foreclosure list. I have a huge list of timelines, costs, statute of limitations, everything under the sun, and gonna give you guys an idea of what we see, or I see as a cost of foreclosure in Iowa, as well as how long it takes. So look at this number. I have 220 days for foreclosure, right? Cindy, vacant property, there's a plus minus, we'll get to that in a second. 220 days, we're looking at approximately about $2,000 to foreclose on it. That's give or take $600 in the Fannie Mae fee, $1,500 for attorney, court, auction, and all that stuff that goes through it.
Yeah,
And
I
publication as well.
Yeah, and I like Iowa. It's not terribly expensive, and it's
Rather
less than
quick.
a year. What I'm looking for foreclosure is less than a year.
Yep. And the redemption period is none from my knowledge. If it is, cool. It's a share of sold situation. And assume super lien, which is HOA, which doesn't apply here.
No.
Now, let me bring this over to my statute of limitations chart. It says last pay received 5 years, maturities 10, due date 10. All the other pillars are blank. So one thing we care about is 5 years from due date. As you can see here, 2019, we're well within that due date, which is great. And this all can be do a huge lookup table, whatnot. And rather usually what you can do sometimes is kind of push up due dates in certain states and push them away.
Right.
Vacant properties are often easy to foreclose on. Deed in lieu, right?
There's positive and negatives for sure. Like
right. You can get properties quickly lose vacancy. You can get deed in lieu vacancies. Usually borrowers get test much. However, the property is bad. If it's occupied, the borrower can greatly modify, reinstate, but they also can fight your foreclosure. They can trash the house.
Mhm.
They can do a lot of stuff, right? They have that power. So there's no right or wrong. I agree with you. So we're looking at this fact that this thing here, we're gonna be bidding based on this kind of number, the $85,000. As you can see, the estimated payoff's a little bit higher than the UPB.
Yeah.
And with the fact of being value be 85, you have the fact that you're looking at probably about a year, fully foreclosures, a little bit less than a year, 9 months to foreclose, get that property back in your hands and start doing something with it or sell at the auction.
Right.
So
Yeah.
you could probably bid a little bit high on this asset with that number, right?
Because
Given
of
the
the
fact
timing.
your costs coming into play.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
So it's not bad. We won't go into exact bid numbers. That's
He bid $1. You can see right here, it's $1, right?
so the
So-
dollar, let me explain that actually. What I do with that is I will sort my spreadsheet by city and state, and then I add a column. I rearrange all the columns to be the order that I like them to be in. And then I'll add a column and I'll just scroll down and I'll just do like a quick scan of each of the loans on that tape. And I'll be able to just say, okay, so I like this one, I like this one, I like this one, I like this one. So I might, tag within the little number 1, I'll tag, I don't know, 5 or 10 off of a tape. And then I'll filter it so all those number 1s come up to the top. So then the ones that I'm actually interested are at the top of that list, and then I can just deal with those ones.
And those ones are determined by state, value, those quick looks.
Yeah, just quick looks. And if I really don't find anything, maybe I'll go through it a little bit slower and see if I see anything for real. But usually I can do it fairly quickly and just say yes,
You do
yes,
it for a
yes,
couple
no,
of
no,
years.
no, no.
Well, we're next asset, something we all like. First thing that pops off my head is Texas, right? When I first got into business, I said, listen, I'll buy all Texas notes and I'll be that person. It makes sense to me until you realize that everyone else is the same exact thing.
Yeah.
Why is Texas popular? Foreclosure is cheap and quick. So you can foreclose by lethal injection, right? So we have our counties, which I'm not sure exactly where that county's at. It's a different area that I'm familiar with, but
This one's, it's not too far from Houston. It's a little
Okay.
bit southwest of Houston.
Okay.
Which, again, when you're looking at location, southwest of Houston, that's kind of right in that hurricane alley. And so that's a bit of a cause for concern, not even
Sure.
like concern, but just awareness, just to know that, potentially you could be looking at some hurricane issues there.
Gotcha. So for me, Texas is a great area.
Yeah.
The downfall of Texas is when if you do a Zillow look, you're going to find that you can't get numbers.
Very difficult.
They don't
to find
report
values.
any numbers on their sales.
Yeah.
My due diligence portal can get some information from different places. So we're able to get some numbers, but if you looking for that deep dive, Gabe says, oh, hey, Gabe, the restart state. What do you mean by restart state? I'm yelling like you can hear me. I apologize.
Well, can you hear me?
Hey,
Gabe,
what do you mean by
Can you hear me over
restart?
here?
Yeah, I can hear you over there.
Oh, awesome.
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to Gabe Cass. He's been around since we've been around. So, Gabe, what do you mean by restart state?
So every time the borrower files bankruptcy, you have to restart the foreclosure
okay,
That's right. That
and
makes
pay
sense.
for it all over again.
yeah, that's fun.
So most places, if you're in BK or they file BK, you can actually start from where it left off. Where Texas doesn't allow that. So that sucks. The other caveat, Texas, if it's a HELOC, you actually have to go through the judicial process and do a full foreclosure. Luckily, I've never ran to that. But learned that at a conference, which is pretty interesting.
I've had that where I thought I was buying it first, and technically it was, but it was structured as a HELOC. So I went to foreclose and expecting a quick foreclosure, and it took whatever it was, 6, 7, 8 months. So, that's not what I thought I was in for, but okay.
Cool. So we have something missing here, which is difficult, right? And sometimes we go back to the seller and say, listen, we can't run numbers on this.
Right.
One of the key things that I look to do is run time value numbers on stuff. Well, I'll be running a course soon, how to do that in a spreadsheet. But you can say, okay, what is my yield number? What is my present value number based on a return?
Yeah.
But you need certain data points to determine what the loan is.
Yeah.
If I
That-
don't know the
that-
first payment and maturity, or term, I don't know how long the term is.
Right.
And I can't determine where they are on the amortization schedule with just a next due date or
Right.
whatnot. So makes it difficult to figure out how many payments are left.
And this one doesn't have any of that. It doesn't have when it started, doesn't have a maturity or due date or payment. So we're missing far too much information
Yeah.
to be able to make any kind of headway on this. So
Yeah.
it's kind of a pass, but I wanted to include it just to show that, like,
Yeah.
you have to have certain pieces of information. I remember a couple of years back, somebody approached me and they wanted to broker a note, which is fine. But he came to me and it was kind of looked like this, where he was missing a bunch of information. I said, okay, well, I need this, 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 and this. And he, to his credit, he came back and said, so why do you need that information? Just so I understand. So I said, well, here's why, and went through it with him. But it's essential. We have to have that information so that we can put it together and see what the numbers are going to look like.
Yeah. So for those who may not be familiar, I'll bring up the sheet for you.
We just get the spreadsheet. We're not looking at.
Yep, I'm gonna bring it over just
Okay,
a
great.
second.
Yeah.
So you should be able to see this.
Yeah, there it is.
Okay. And I'm gonna show people how to build this thing future, but what you can see here is I can run any number on here and figure out what my payment should be, what my yield should be. Based on putting in information, right? If I have a purchase price here and I want, this is my bid number. So I say, okay, I want a certain return on a number. What should I bid? That's when it comes over to the PV section, right? And it says, okay, I want a 10% return on this thing. And I want it to be, there's 180 payments left. The payment's 665.87. My purchase price would be this. Granted, this is for performing loans only, right? But it's a good way to figure out.
Yeah.
As you can see, if I drop that rate down, this number will change because of the way that it's written out. Okay. And that's what happens. And I have a servicing fee in here. You can change it and then it'll come out to that number. So it's almost a net monthly payment return. So this is what we're saying. We can't totally do it with the way it's at right now. So because we don't have how many months are left,
Right.
we don't, we need to have the interest rate. We can figure out one if we have the three.
Right.
We can't figure out any of them if we're missing two.
Right. So we're just missing too much information on that one.
Yep.
I'm still interested. So this is the one that I brought. So I'm going to go back to the seller and ask for some more information because I'm interested, but I need more information.
Yep. All right. Next one we're looking at is in Illinois. First off the bat, I'm off. Illinois is a state I am not touching.
Illinois is very difficult to deal with.
Yes.
Peoria is only slightly better than Cook, and Cook is better than hell. Like it's a terrible place to work in. It's just difficult. Not impossible, and I don't want to,
Yeah.
say that it's completely.
Remember,
not
guys,
gonna
if
go,
you're
but
from
it's
Chicago, we're not bashing the city. We're
No.
bashing the note legal process and what
Yeah.
goes into it for foreclosure and things like that. I don't do Illinois. You need a license first off in Illinois. Most of the assets come up in Cook County, so it's almost pointless for me to do anything. And there are a couple counties besides Cook that are more difficult. For that fact, it's not something I'm attracted to. But
Yeah, I agree, but I did like the number, so I wanted to put it on here.
yes,
just for
tell us about what you like about the
discussion
numbers
purposes.
here.
So this is an example of one where the collateral value is higher and the unpaid balance or payoff is much lower. So I like that. I like having that kind of flexibility. You know what? I like it when they're even as well, but I like having that difference there because it opens up the doors. So what I mean by that is if these guys start paying, great, then I've got excellent protection on that. If they don't pay and I take it to foreclosure, there's a high chance that I'm going to get full payoff when it goes to auction. There's a slight chance that I'll actually get the property back. And in
Yeah.
that case, then I've
Home run.
grand slam home run.
Ton of equity in this deal.
Yeah. Yeah. So I like it for a bunch of different reasons, but that's a few.
Yeah, and the fact that you can, if this goes to auction, all world happens and you get the asset back, you got to kill a deal. However, if they don't, you're bidding up to the UPB, and that's where you're going to be at.
Yeah. And a full
you have
payoff.
a lot of
is not a
upside
bad
here.
thing.
You said the balance is the same as the
Balance the same.
total balance and the UPB. Probably the fact that they didn't give a full total balance on the asset, or they're saying that the total, which doesn't make much sense, right, Gabe? That the total balance is equal, so that it could be the seller just didn't give the right data.
Yeah. That's most likely, but he's right. Because the due date is a couple of years ago, that
Yep.
total balance number, automatically that total balance number should be higher.
Unless they're sitting there doing nothing, but there should be there should be taxes paid, any
Yeah.
kind of additional advances being made. Total balance is what you can totally collect according to the seller at the auction. It has to be verified when you're buying it, right? We have interest rates, right? These two aren't too comfortably, but they're better than 2 or 3%.
Right.
Are these
Private
reverse
order.
mortgages or are these regular stuff?
These are regular. The other thing that caught my eye on this that also makes it a no for me is it's a condo. And
Ooh.
I'm not a fan of condos.
Why is that?
You've got condo associations. A lot of the time, if there's a lien with a condo association, that does not show up on a regular lien search. So you can get caught with some huge homeowners association, condo association bill that you couldn't research. And the only way that I know how to, and if you've got a different way, I'm open to it. But the only way I know how to research that is to call the condo association directly.
Yeah.
And most of the time, but not always, they will tell you what that number is.
And there are certain states that allow you to be maxed out as long as you file the foreclosure correctly, that you're not responsible for the additional fees, like Florida. I would ask your attorney if the state you're looking at allows or doesn't allow it, because then you'd be maxed out at, say, 6 months of whatever the HOA fees are, and you're not held to that standard. So
Right.
interesting. I like condos. You can hard, fast value them. It's easy to value. The roofs are connected, so more likely the property's not destroyed to the point, because it's connected to another place. If there's a real problem, the condo association will probably maintain it somehow, some way, and whatnot. So, but yes, delinquent HOA dues can be a pain in the butt.
So one more thing with the HOA dues is those keep racking up for as long as you hold it. So here as an example, I had a note on a condo in DC, and we were doing a foreclosure. It was vacant, and we had to foreclose. And the DC foreclosures are not simple either, and so it just kept dragging on and dragging on. And every 6 months, I think 3 times. So it took like a year and a half, and 3 times I got hit with an HOA bill that I had to pay. And which is ridiculous, and it just added to my cost. And so, just to be aware.
And getting the cost of what the HOA fee is per month is sometimes difficult to get.
Yeah.
It's hard to get that stuff, right?
So I'm not a huge fan.
What if the HOA is rented out in the vacant condo? The HOA is still due no matter what is going on to the person who owns the property, who has a debt on it. So that continue to go. There's nothing that changes who lives there or how it's structured. That will continue to go build up. Now the lender doesn't have to pay it, but it will build up and whatnot. Go ahead.
It'll build up, and if it's a super lien state like DC, they can go ahead and foreclose. It was like $2,500 every 6 months, but they can go ahead and foreclose, and then I'm going to have to pay not only that HOA fee, but also whatever fees they've tacked on for attorneys and blah 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 blah.
Yeah,
So
Cindy, Florida is a super lien state,
Yeah.
but it's not in the same essence. I'm not good at explaining Florida's super lien process, but it's like, yes, they are jump first position, but not fully. It's kind of confusing. So
Yeah.
Actually, talked to Erin. We can't tag her, we're not on Facebook, but Erin explained it really well. So I wanted to, anything else with this deal? So I like the fact of the first, right?
Yeah.
We have no other data here at all that tells us anything.
I liked some of the numbers on it, but I don't like that it's in Illinois, first of all, and I don't like that it's a condo. So for me, that's a pass. But I wanted to just bring it in just for
Yep. So one loan, another loan we looked at is in Montgomery, Alabama. This loan here, Alabama, the only downfall Alabama is there's a 12-month redemption unless the loan was created after 2016 and it goes to 6 months. So this is a loan that I think it's pretty cool. The month payment is 197, which is quite low, right? This is a loan that if you're low in capital, looking to buy an asset, why is the monthly payment low concern to me? Well, because if I go and subtract $30 for servicing fees, what happens there, right? This drops to 167. And how much is $30 out of $200, right? 15%. It's a lot. So it knocks a lot of the money out of the deal versus if that was a $700 or $500 payment.
Yeah.
That's a killer, but it kills your return. Again, we're based on returns. We're not based on UPB, and that return will decrease because of the servicing fee. So we're looking at a UPB of 20 grand here, again, low. But the value of the property is up. So we're back in the same situation where we have equity room.
Yeah, like
right?
50% equity. That
Yeah.
the numbers are low, but if you're talking about 50% equity, that's pretty good.
Yeah. So, and this borrower, from my memory, was quite too close to reperforming. They find taxes $73 a year, which is crazy. Origination is 2005.
Yeah.
Original mortgage is there. Next due date 6/1, right?
Good.
Which means they're active. They're actually current.
Yeah.
At the time we did it, right? We look at it.
So they
Last
paid
payment.
in
What does that
advance.
mean? Right? They're ahead of the game.
Yeah.
So you may say, well, next due date must be 3/10. No, they actually paid and they're caught up, which is interesting to happen, but it does happen.
That's pretty good.
Yep. Maturity date is way out. So to
Yeah.
me, the first thing that pops out here is the fact that I have a 2005 and 2043. That doesn't seem right. So there must have been modification happen somewhere, somehow, that makes this make sense. Because for it to make sense, even a 30 or 40 year, the numbers don't make sense. They don't do 43 and a half years
Right.
unless some crazy term that someone made, and most likely not. 9% interest rate, to me, that's a very attractive number.
That's
It
good.
helped me get that number up. It helps my P&I get higher and whatnot. But if I ran numbers on it, you'd probably find out the numbers may not match, right?
Yeah.
Several states, 200 payments left, right? Occupy have a 3/1. We have year built. This all kind of comes from my internal due diligence portal. If there's agents on it and whatnot and so forth. Less pending date, again, all data points. If there was something here in my portal, grab it with send information and whatnot. So those are kind of 3 loans we looked at. I love for you guys to send over deals that you guys are evaluating and looking at. And what we're gonna do in the future is going to run this again, hopefully. And if people submit offers, we can dive into it. We want to get rid of the borrower's name, get rid of any identifying information. No street address. You send it to us a street address so we can kind of value the property. And value the property means diving into like a Zillow. Our portal allows you to kind of run. It gives you 3 AVMs. Doesn't give you a Zillow estimate, but it gives you 3 values from 3 different sources, plus the annual tax appraisal value. So again, it gives you stuff, but it will allow us to say, what is the collateral? Is this true? Is this not true? Because seller says it is, doesn't make it true. Please don't go off the seller's property value. They're probably fibbing somewhere. They pull multiple numbers. That's where we want to look and say, okay, Nathan, what do you see the value is at? And we can do it hard, where we dive onto different websites and value by comps, or we can run EVMs quickly.
Yeah.
So we want to get the data.
We'll go through and do the same kind of thing. What do you like? What do you don't like? And why? And what's worth it?
We're not going to give you what our bid price would be. We're not going to say how we'd offer it. We just look at the fact that what we do like about it, we don't like about it. There's places in Ohio, if you gave me a city and state, I said, well, Ohio's okay. And you give me a county in Ohio, I'm gonna say I'm gonna be avoiding it like the plague, right? There's certain counties in certain states that based on our experience
Yeah.
of deals, I had a bad experience. Nathan may have a good experience, but I had a bad experience and I wouldn't dive into that because of that county, timeframes, issues, bond requirements, things like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. If anyone has any questions, feel free to jump in here. All the states that I avoid are California. They're coming out with some new issues, new concerns that really doesn't make me feel comfortable with the future of no investing in California. Debt license requirements and bonds and whatnot. And keep abreast of what happens in that spectrum of debt licenses because it's changing since COVID. And certain states require, like Massachusetts used to require a original lender to show up, not knowing that when you're foreclosing, right?
That's
that was a problem.
They're doing that
Massachusetts or
in Maine. They're doing that in Maine still, and man, what a pain. There's a workaround. So if you got something in Maine, talk to me because I can help you do the workaround. But it's a pain.
Yeah. And in places like Jersey, I know that if it's vacant more than 3 years, you can prove it. You can fast foreclosure. It's crazy. Yes, bond changes by county and city. Yeah, absolutely. Now the bond in Ohio is actually a property bond where they mow lawns, they maintain the property, and they just take money out of the kitty. They don't question it. You have to put the 10 grand up. It's a little bit different. Some counties enforce it, some don't. Yeah, problematic. That's pretty cool stuff. So does anyone have any questions, curiosity, or specific examples that you want I can open up the microphone or put in the chat that you had a question about something. If you do, I'll meet you or put in the chat. I'm gonna bring up 2 more subjects, but if no one has any questions, we'll tune off for the day. Now, when it comes to statute of limitations, I mentioned before, there are certain ways to get around statute of limitations.
Yeah.
But what you can do is you can ask the seller what is happening, because statute of limitation ran out doesn't mean you can't do anything. It means I want more information to see why it stopped.
Right.
What did you do to stop it, if anything? Now, if they start foreclosure, the time clock will restart because of that. Or you can push the next due date up. And sometimes you do that and sometimes you don't.
Yeah.
Which states can you foreclose a property when vacant longer than 3 years? That's just New Jersey law. That's not a one state situation. I know that's New Jersey. You can do foreclosure faster in certain states if you do it through federal court, which is the video on YouTube. If you haven't watched it, take a look at that on our channel. Todd, feel free to, if post to the chat, and if I can unmute you, it's a longer question, I'll let it go through. But yes, so vacant properties is a New Jersey law that comes about, and I'll post if I can, that law per se. Your attorneys will be that key for it. Have you run into any kind of statute of limitations issues, Nathan? How did you handle it?
I have nothing that's ever stopped me cold though. For example, we had one in Florida. It was past the statute of limitations. However, it was kind of an interesting one. It was a son and mother that were both on the loan documents. The mother had passed away. The son was still living there. It was past the statute of limitations. So to overcome that, he was still wanted to stay and pay, and it was much easier for him just to kind of, it wasn't actually a reinstatement, but get back on track. So we did a modification and recorded the modification, and then that reset the clock. So he was back into normal. And that was with our friend of our good friend, Erin Quinn. She helped me figure that one out. So that was one. I've had it where we've moved up the date, a few different things. Nothing's ever stopped me cold yet, but I definitely look at it, and it's different in every state. So you don't just think that because it worked this way in this state, that doesn't necessarily mean it works the same way in another state.
Yes. Yeah. Statute of limitations are state by state. Yearly, I reach out to my attorneys and ask them for updates. You'll see, Tony Siddall, he'll say, listen, here's the new updates if anything's changed.
And not even in the timing, but even how you can deal with it in that state.
Yes.
So that's different per state. So make sure you check that out.
Yeah, absolutely. So the there may be like in Florida, right? Years ago, you couldn't do anything about statute of limitations if the time period ended. However, now you can push up the due date past to a point where it's no longer statute of limitations and file the foreclosure and start over from
Right.
there. So it's pretty cool. You have to forgive any kind of interest and stuff like that from before that, but yeah, it's key. So I'll jump to questions here. If property going to auction next week, but none of the real estate sites have it indicated. What's the best way to advertise it? What have you done?
To advertise that something's going to auction?
Yep.
I never have.
Woo.
That's a great question. I've never.
I've done a few things. I've joined Facebook groups. I've joined LinkedIn groups, posting on groups that are local to that property.
Yeah.
Hey, I have an auction sale coming up. Here's what we're doing. I've also done Craigslist, where I've posted an auction date on Craigslist, and things like that. I'll jump on. I also, another way I do it, you guys don't have the angle to do it, and hopefully my portal will come out and be big enough to do this. But I also reach out to investors who are local to the property, and I'll email them out. Hey, I have a property going to auction. Do you know anyone that may be interested? Here's my set amount. This will the opening bid. Take a look at it.
Oh, that's cool.
You know, Cindy said she sold an REO on Facebook Marketplace,
Nice.
right?
works.
But remember the fact that going to auctions is a little bit different, and most people get confused. Why does real estate not have it listed? I'm not sure exactly how Zillow figures out if it's going to auction or not, what data they're pulling. It may be in a county they can't pull from. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know.
Vaughn asked, is there somewhere a list somewhere about state licenses? I encourage you. I'm going to say there is not for a really big reason. Watch our YouTube video on debt licenses. It's not clear cut. Depends what your company's doing, how you're structured, what you're doing with the assets. There's a lot that goes into figuring out what states require a debt license for
And if
lenders.
you require a debt license in that state.
Yeah. So it's not a clear cut. We have our internal list and I would love to share it, but it's so difficult to do because it's based on our data and our property and our business. That's difficult. Unlike, Illinois requires a license no matter what. Some states don't.
And
Texas, for
depending on-
example, doesn't.
How active you are in that state, that kind of thing. So it really, really depends. So you
Yeah.
gotta-
So Cindy said, yeah, Cornerstone. We actually did the webinar with Cornerstone.
Yeah.
If I can find the YouTube video on that, it may be helpful. But that's what let me stop sharing them. So I think for you, and believe me, it's not an easy topic to understand. I'm gonna tell you, I've watched the video a few times and I still don't fully grasp it.
Yeah.
Because there's so many little intricacies.
And you'll see on the show that we did with them, it was very much it could be this or it could be that, and it could be that, and it could be this. And so in the end, they just say, just call us.
Yep.
Call us
And it's not a cheap thing. That's the other issue with it.
Yeah.
So let me see if it's this one. Should be.
Is it just called Cornerstone or?
I can change the name of it.
Definitely.
No investing debt license.
There it
Where's
is.
no investor? I'm not sure why it's named all that crazy stuff. But yeah, and I'll put in the chat here for everyone.
Worth checking out for sure.
Yeah. I can change the name of Cornerstone as well if it helps people. But yeah, take a look at this video. It's not as clean cut as I would hope it would be.
Yeah.
But take a look at it and take lots of notes. So it's a lot. Yep, Christian Barters, it will be in the video as well. Yep, absolutely. Any other questions from anyone else of how we look at things? If hopefully we'll do this in the future again soon on assets you guys are looking at. Again, we're not looking to steal anything. We're looking just to get you some ideas of how we see things and whatnot. So
Yeah. What we like, what we don't like.
What we don't like.
Positive, negatives, whatever.
And believe me, there's deals where we explain a lot today, but there's a lot of deals that we say, oh, well, we don't like it for this reason, and we haven't talked about it.
Yeah.
It comes down to Sometimes it's the county, sometimes the state, sometimes it's a value of the property, sometimes the type of property, like land. I won't even get involved with land. Some people do. Right? Sometimes it's CFD, which I'm not a big CFD person. If it's performing, I run a number to see what my yield would be, what I would have to bid to get that yield to be a certain dollar amount it's performing. And if that bid amount is less than 40% of my UPB, I'm not going to make an offer to the seller. Not gonna bother. So that comes to play.
Yeah.
So without any further ado, we're gonna let
Yeah.
everyone disconnect. Me and Nathan are gonna chat for a few minutes. I'm gonna stop the recording.